most innovation is coming from young people, and it needs to be fostered through intergenerational support, through investments into young people's ideas.
Hello, welcome back to our podcast, The Zero Hunger Project. I'm your host, Suman Roy,
I'm Stacey Anil.
and today we are going to talk about a topic which is near and dear to many people's heart. What is the future of transformation of food system? Who are we looking at to make a difference? And for that, we have a really key person in this conversation, Mr. Kazuki Kitaoka from FAO, the Food and Agriculture Organization. So, Stacia, tell me about him.
I would love to tell you more about it. Kazuki leads global youth and women's empowerment initiatives at the Food and Agriculture Organization, which is at FAO of the United Nations, where he manages the World Food Forum. This FAO initiative serves as a collaborative platform to engage youth, scientists, and civil society in reshaping the future of food systems. The forum supports the UN Sustainable Development Goals, the SDGs that we've been talking about, particularly SDG 2, which is zero hunger. Under his leadership, the World Food Forum has expanded youth leadership in agriculture, policy innovation, and food system equity, with programming across youth action tracks, innovation labs, and education pathways. His work emphasizes the importance of intergenerational collaboration, equity in agri-food transitions, and meaningful inclusion of underrepresented communities in global conversations. Love that. While Kazuki's work is global in scale, its themes align deeply with issues faced in urban Canadian contexts, including Toronto, where youth-led initiatives, data access, and gender-based food insecurity remain pressing concerns. Welcome.
Thank you so much for having me.
So, Kazuki, I think we're going to dive right into it because when I'm talking about the future of the food systems and we have you talking about it, I think it's not a secret to realize that we are looking at youth and women to be a champion for us down the road. And that is where, at least, I see where the direction is going. But I think the key thing that I want to ask you is, like, can you tell us a little bit about what are the most promising actions from young people that you have seen that is transforming the food system in the last little while?
Yeah, thanks so much. And there's obviously a lot of action going on around the world in this important field, our agri-food systems. And actually, let me perhaps start with why we are talking about agri-food systems rather than only food systems, because the distinction is quite important. Because the agri-food system includes, of course, our food systems, but it also includes all of those things that our agriculture actually creates that are outside of our food. Timber, very important in Canada, but also let's think about cotton, let's think about medical plants. All of these things are part of the agri-food system. So we are looking here at an extremely wide area of or sector. And of course, young people and women across all of these different sectors that are part of the agri-food systems play an extremely important role. And its importance was recognized by the membership of the Food and Agriculture Organization of the UN, the FAO. Just 2 years ago, a new office was created. This is the Office of Youth and Women. And this really showed the recognition of 194 members of the UN that youth and women need to be at the center of the response to many of the challenges that we see these days, challenges that are affecting both our food system, but also everything that is the non-food part of our agricultural and agri-food system. So perhaps a couple of examples of really great actions that in particular young people are doing at the moment. We have supported young people in many countries to work on agri-food policy, for instance, and there is increasingly a recognition that young people need to be around the table when governments are talking about how the agri-food systems in the future in the locality where governments are are discussing it, whether it's at the local level, at the city level, or at the national level, or also at the global level, that young people need to have an input here, need to have a say in terms of how the agri-food landscape, the agri-food system of their locality should look like from their point of view in the future. As we all know, policies are long-term. This is something where young people need to be involved and influence the policy with their perspective of they would like to see. And for that, one of the great initiatives actually that was growing over the last 5 years is the Global Youth Assembly. And the Youth Assembly, of course, at the global level is coming together, as you said, in the World Food Forum. And this is the global discussion on how the agri-food system interlinks with, for instance, our environmental systems, with the climate, but also how social considerations need to be taken into account when it's coming to policies in the agri-food system globally. Here we're talking, of course, about young women, for instance, and barriers that they face. But we are also talking about specific concerns of young farmers, of indigenous youth, and others. So this youth assembly is then broken down to different countries, and we see increasingly how young people are coming together at the country level, at the city level, sometimes at the university level, to talk about all of these important issues. So that's really one aspect, and I think very promising initiative that has been kicked off in the last years. Others include, for instance, initiatives around innovation. As we all know, most innovation is coming from young people, and it needs to be fostered through intergenerational support, through investments into young people's ideas. And for that, one of the big pushes in the last years was a youth-led innovation lab that was specifically created around young people's ideas, inspirations, research, technologies, and also their startups sometimes, to create the future we would like to see in the agri-food systems. And of course, all of that is not possible if our education system is not taken into account the complexities of the agri-food world. We are talking here, of course, about everything from food safety issues all the way to how our agri-food system links to the environment, to our planet. This requires system thinking, and if our education system is not following suit, we cannot have the innovators and the policymakers that should create the agri-food system of tomorrow. So we have been supporting youth education programs with networks of educators who are coming together, thinking about how can we bring all of those complex things into primary schools, into secondary schools, but also how can we advance that at the tertiary level through university education that is more integrated, that is more interdisciplinary. So these are perhaps a couple of the sort of key programs that we are working on. But last but not least, let me also point perhaps at one very important area where we have been really supporting young people, which is around youth culture. As we all know, food is culture. Agri-food and agriculture is already in the word, no? It's culture. Our land is very close to where we are from, where what we eat is extremely important in terms of who we are. So, and I'm myself coming from a country, Japan, that is very proud of its food culture, and young people, of course, are the barriers for keeping this food culture alive, but also transforming it perhaps in a way that they would like to see it in the wake of cultural globalization, of international interactions, but also in their wish to taste many different types of foods that we have around the world and different types of cuisines. So youth culture here is an extremely strong component when it's coming to advancing what we see today and what we perhaps we'll see tomorrow in terms of the agri-food system and how it's structured, what kind of consumers they the system is looking into, and also how the sector overall develops.
I imagine social media has a lot to do with disseminating food culture. You just need to turn on TikTok or Instagram or whatever you're on and see there's kids eating, cooking, exchanging ideas. It's actually really cool. That whole idea of sort of the kids bringing up the youth, bringing us all up and getting us where we need to go is amazing. Um, I wanted to ask you about women. Women play obviously an incredibly vital role in food systems worldwide, in all systems worldwide, frankly. But they're incredibly underrepresented in leadership. What is your take on that, first of all? And what are the barriers to that? How can we overcome those barriers?
Yeah, this is a central question that you're asking, and perhaps also, I mean, giving a couple of facts here. Uh, why the why women are significantly underrepresented when it's coming to leadership in the agri-food system, but also in all decision-making roles. It's not only at the government level, but all the way broken down. And of course, I mean, I think all of us understand that this is not a question of ability; it's a systemic issue that we're looking at. And in many parts of the world, of course, women are still facing a lot of barriers when it's coming to access, for instance, to land ownership. This is when it's coming to agri-food systems, an essential prerequisite in order to actually do something. But also to credit, for instance. Access to credit is often linked to the ownership of a bank account. This is very often women are not allowed to even have a bank account. The same when it's coming to the access to platforms where decision making is actually happening. Sometimes these barriers are cultural. Sometimes these barriers are even legal. Sometimes it is for sure societal in one way or another. So without these resources and opportunities, it's really difficult for women to be in a position where they're able to scale agri enterprises, for instance, or where they can influence policies and so on. So this is a major problem. We are talking here, of course, about 50+% of our entire world population that is excluded in that way. So
In so many ways, because
Exactly.
you're excluded
Exactly.
in basically all of the ways.
and for this critical gap that we see here, and it's an investment gap really. What we do need to see is, number one, the reform of our of legal systems that would allow women to actually access what I was saying before: land, credit, investments, and so on. It would also mean to reduce any kind of legal barriers or hindrance for women to access political or similar offices, political platforms that they would like to get engaged in. But let me go back to perhaps the investment side in particular, because the investment gap, in particular for women-led agribusiness, is disproportionately high, and funding here, really pro-women funding in this space, in this agri-food space, is perhaps one of the most important non-legal areas where we could actually get a lot of women with their ideas, their inspiration, and their entrepreneurial drive into this sector, active in this sector. And I think through that alone, we will see a big growth, actually, not only of women leadership in the sector, but also of the sector itself. I think the sector actually holds itself back by not investing more in women entrepreneurship.
Everything holds
Yes.
itself back by not investing in women. I mean, everything does. I participate in microloans, um, specifically in agriculture, but also in other areas, particularly for women all over the world. And I've been doing it for a long time. I feel like that's one way that we can sort of circumvent these systems that maybe were not created for women to flourish. Um, you're saying that instead of trying to bring down these systems that are kind of intractable at this point, that if we sort of backfill them with these ideas of bringing in funding and things like that. We won't have to change the infrastructure. We can already fill a gap that's already there. Is that the type of thing that you're thinking of? This sort of micro lending idea, those types of initiatives?
Yeah, it can start at micro lending. I think there's good and there's bad examples of microcredits. So let's also acknowledge that through microcredits, very poor people can be actually put into a poverty trap and into a credit trap. So there needs to be, together with micro lending, there needs to be micro insurance as well that allows for if climate change happens and it happens more frequently than we perhaps want to, that those who are actually the most vulnerable are not being put into that situation that we definitely don't want them to be in terms of a credit crisis. I think we need to think here from a microsystem all the way through to, because there are a lot of women entrepreneurs who don't only want to have a microloan. A microloan is for one cow, for a sack of crops or similar. But when we are looking at women entrepreneurs in places where they have great ideas and they lack simply a proper investment into their business, into their idea, into their technology, these are not microloans. These are proper investment instruments. And I think that pro-women investment instruments are definitely one way to advance this sector beyond, of course, the poverty eradication microloans. No, there can be very good projects here, but I think that we need to think bigger here when it's coming to the opportunities that we are missing from not investing considerably more in women and their ideas and their entrepreneurial power when it's in the agri-food sector.
And I agree with you. I just think we need to change the mindset to be pro women in general. I think that the problem is you're trying to convince somebody to provide money or resources or all of those things in an environment that is not pro women, frankly. So it's hard to turn that ship around when there's a much bigger tanker sort of blocking the route. And it's hard to it's hard not to feel frustrated. I was just saying it's hard not to feel frustrated by that.
Yeah, and I think it can be frustrating, but I think we shouldn't be frustrated. I think we should be looking at the solutions here. And as you said, it's these are sectors which are still very, very much male dominated. But that is why I think that one part of the solution is a continuous education of and also participation of men as well in such solutions. And as I was putting my finger on before, we should really look at the missed opportunities. These are opportunity costs that we're looking at. This is where potentially this sector could be growing, could be much more flourishing in our economies as well, if we didn't exclude 50% of the population from being active and being a contributor to the development of the agri-food sector. So I think we perhaps we need to look at perhaps we need to also look at the rhetoric and the narrative that we are using, bringing more men, converting more men to understand that this is really important, but also the entire society to see that this is something that is really holding us back at many levels, and we need to change that.
Absolutely.
But Kazuki, going back to your team and your department, are there any concrete steps that your team is taking to help this cause?
When it's coming to the FAO, there was 2 years ago, there was a major report actually on women in agri-food systems. And that report in itself showed all of the different hindrances that women have around the world in being successful in this particular sector. And there were some recommendations that were given specifically to governments. That is our main role as FAO, is advice to the member governments what they should do in terms of bringing men and women to a level playing field. This report was sort of the kickoff for quite a number of initiatives that started around the world. What my office specifically now is doing is starting to advocate for these initiatives, advocate for stronger women networks as well. Networks are power. Networks can be a source for information, for knowledge, for know-how, and for technology transfer. These kind of networks are one of the things that we are now starting to build up. As I said before, our office is very new. We were only created last year. So we are still a bit in the beginning of it.
You have a lot of work to do, Kazuki.
Yeah.
There's no rest for the wicked, I'm afraid. It's excellent, though. I'm glad to hear it, because it's one thing to say, well, we created these policies and then they sort of evaporated into the ether. It's nice to hear that there's follow up, that people are actually moving forward with these things, that there's accountability to be had, and that there's support for this advocacy, because many, many, many good ideas die on the vine when there's no support to breathe life into them. And developing networks, as we know, in any capacity, in any system, is much better than people going it alone. So it's great that you're reinforcing these networks and providing opportunity for people.
Absolutely.
Outstanding. It's great.
Thank you.
Game changing.
Kazuki, this is such an important conversation, but the time is running out for this episode, but we cannot let you go.
No,
No way.
we have lots of things to talk about.
So we are going to have you in the next week's episode again, and we're going to continue this conversation.
Mhm,
So for all our viewers, there is so much we learned from Kazuki already
mhm.
in this first episode. Couple of the key takeaways that I have is the difference between the agri-food system and the food system.
Hmm.
That was a huge learning for me personally, because when we are talking about food systems, we are of course talking about the food itself, but when we looking at the broader picture, then that's a whole different conversation.
Mhm.
And it also motivates the governments to be paying a little more attention
Well,
when it's the
because
broader.
it's a much bigger problem than just one singular thing, right?
Exactly. And the importance of women and youth being recognized by the UN, which kind of fascinated me about the work the UN is trying to do.
Mhm.
And in women, we have heard that they have advanced a little bit. In the youth, might not have advanced as much.
Which kind of makes sense, because women feed into the economy where the youth don't. So they probably aren't getting the same kind of attention.
And youth is transient.
Yes.
They are coming and going, but the women is there, and they are kind of continuing the journey, which was fantastic.
Yeah.
Like a couple of great stories we heard about the youth innovation labs and empowering youth. That
Mhm.
was something that was a huge takeaway for me. So the youth is working so hard, and we just need to support them.
Mhm.
And the FAO and the work that FAO is doing under Kazuki's leadership, especially to advocate for initiatives and stronger women networks.
Mhm.
And the key word, one sentence if you need to take away, that networks are power.
Yes, absolutely. In every possible way.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So take that away till we come back next time and we have this conversation. In the meantime, if you haven't subscribed yet to our podcast, please subscribe and follow us. Give us your feedback. We love to hear from you. And together we will have a hunger free world.